Hello, everyone. It's Michael from Flow MSP. I appreciate you taking the time to join our webinar today. If you have questions or comments during the webinar, you can leave them in the comments section and we'll get those answered for you. Today, we will be talking about hydrant management and the use of Flow MSP to address hydrant management concerns with our guest, Assistant Chief Michael Fonamos from the Wytheville Fire Department. And just wanted to say thanks for joining us today, Assistant Chief.
Michael, thanks for having me once again.
Glad to have you, and happy to have you address this topic for us.
Well, appreciate it, and once again, it's a pleasure, working with you on the various projects that we've had, through Flow MSP, and for all the listeners out there today or those viewing on Facebook, one of the biggest things that we looked at when we chose Flow MSP was the ability and rather ease of ability for our crews to utilize it on their smartphones and tablets. And one of those obviously was our identification and management of our fire hydrants, our water supply system. So once, a little background, I was hired here in December of 2019, and immediately the chief and I had sat down to discuss what can we do to improve our pre-plans and what can we do to improve not only our water supply, but identifying the needs of our water supply system and hopefully increasing, or I should say decreasing, our ISO score. We haven't had a review in over 5 years, so we're due for it. And obviously having Flow MSP as our platform has made it a lot easier to get things organized to prepare for our ISO review. Michael, did you want me to just jump into how we got into our program, or do you have something else that you
No,
want
you can go ahead and talk a little bit about how you address hydrant management and how you're using Flow today to help with that.
Sure. So when we started, we had approached the town, and we said, how many fire hydrants do we have? And we got a ballpark number, but there was really no set figure saying, well, we have 300 hydrants, we have 500 hydrants. It was just a ballpark of, this is what we should have. Well, obviously over time, hydrants go out of service, they're damaged, new ones get put in from construction, and sometimes those things slip through the cracks. So what we did is we started using our Flow app with our demo account, and literally we drove to every street in town and the part of the county that we cover here in Wythe County, and GPS tagged every single hydrant. That was our first concern. We weren't concerned about what flow we had. We just wanted to know how many we had and how many were accessible. So over the course of the last 8 to 9 months, we have identified 539 hydrants in our first due area, which is the town of Wytheville and Wythe County that we respond to. So once we were able to identify how many hydrants that we truly had, then we set up where we wanted to get into the flow testing. So obviously there's several different ways to do it. Department A's is better than Department B's and so on, but overall we all follow NFPA guidelines on how to properly flow test, or we should. So one of the first things that we did was we drafted up a policy or an operating guidelines. And ours here, as you can see on the screen, is titled water supply. So it's encompassing the fire hydrants as well as mobile water supply and shuttles. So basically, we just defined, what our purpose was. Obviously, we're the authority having jurisdiction, and what are the proper procedures that we're going to identify. Identifying a water supply officer, which it's the fire chief and or designee, which is myself. Basically acting as a liaison with our town water supply people through Public Works. And, we drafted this policy and guideline going over, what are the fixed water supplies and, how do we interact if there's problems with it and so forth. And then we identified, proper hydrant testing and what devices are we going to use. And I'll show you what we use here in a minute. One of the things that we did identify after we wrote our guidelines is we basically have 3 separate sizes of fire hydrants. Now, not to confuse everybody, but there's a lot of different makers out there. There's Mueller, AVK, Darling, Kennedy's, probably 50 million others. So that was one of the things we wanted to identify as well is the manufacturer and the dates that they were put in. But with the size of hydrants, it can get pretty confusing. So we actually have 5-inch steamer caps, 4-inch steamer caps, and then the regular 2.5 steamer caps. So as we went through talking about on our guidelines of water supply, hydrant maintenance, we identified, the various sizes. So I'm just going to show you real quick on these pictures. This hydrant here is the 4.5 inch connection on the main steamer cap. So we decided to paint those as white. So that way we knew when we showed up on a hydrant, on a scene, that we needed our adapter to connect our LDH humid valve. I think it's pretty easy to tell the difference between a 4.5 or a 5-inch compared to a 2.5. So what we ended up doing was the 2.5 caps were all yellow, and the 5-inch caps we kept as yellow. And then the, we'll say, oddball at 4.5 was painted white, which stands out pretty good. It's a lot easier to identify that in the middle of the night, which, a lot of people we've talked to said, well, why? Why don't you know the difference? And it's like, you try and figure it out at 3:30 in the morning. Your adrenaline's pumping, you just woke up, and it's just one little step that makes it easier for our personnel to not have to worry about it and maybe pick the wrong size by, a 1/2 inch. So the 4.5 inch have the white cap on the main steamer, and the 5-inch and the 2.5s are all painted yellow. So as you can see, these hydrants have different tape, reflective tape around the bonnet or the main stem of the barrel. And that is per NFPA code as far as, our gallons per minute, our flow. And we chose just to go with a plain yellow hydrant. It's one color. It's easy to see for the most part. A lot of people wanted us to stick with the traditional red. Red's kind of hard to find at night, but we chose to put here across the top by the bonnet the reflective tape matching the NFPA code to the gallons per minute flow. And this has really worked out well. And here's my 7-year-old son who went out with me over the summer to help mark some of the hydrants. And, if you guys have that opportunity, to take your child with you to help out. Not only does it help build the servant leadership mindset with them, but it also shows the community that, you know, we are a family organization and we are involved with the community across the board as a family. Look at that grin. He just loved it being out there with us. One of the things that we did identify afterwards, and it was my fault, I wasn't as clear, but we said cut the chains off. We don't like having the chains on there. I know a lot of organizations still do, you know, so people don't steal the caps. But this is one of the things that I said cut the chains, and they left the hooks that are on the caps. So we had to go back when we were painting and cutting those off. So just, you know, when you do stuff like that, make sure you're pretty clear on what you're trying to do. And that's, you know, something that I learned the hard way. When we went out and were identifying the hydrants, we wanted to make sure that we had access to the fire hydrants, obviously, not only for the painting purposes and identifying, but also should we need to use it in an emergency. So we had the crews taking pictures of those hydrants that were blocked when we identified them. And obviously, you know, per NFPA, you want to have a good minimum of 36 inches around each hydrant, 3 feet. So that way you have accessibility. And one of the things that we did was we drafted a letter that we would leave with the homeowner. And it wasn't nasty, it was very generic. And it just said, you know, we've been out identifying hydrants and we noticed that this hasn't been taken care of. We're going to come back and service, maintenance it, paint it. And we would really like it if you could clear your debris or bushes from around there. And that was really advantageous for us, instead of us trying to come in and cut them down or trim them back, and then that causes some heartache for the residents. So once we identified our hydrants, we created this Excel spreadsheet that also matches up with our reports from the Flow MSP app. Now, when we printed off our app through Flow MSP, it gave us our GPS location to the hydrants. In our Excel sheet, I really didn't care so much about that because why duplicate what we already had? So basically, as you can see on this sheet, it was the date, what shift went out, and where each hydrant was located. And they went out and they got the static flow, the residual flow, and the device that we use, which is the Hose Monster hydrant testing kit. We were able to, let's see, where is it here? We take our static pressure, our residual flow, then we get a flow rating, and then we plug it in here, and then it gives us our required flow from, you know, what we've tested. And that's what comes up here is our total gallons per minute. So I'm not the math guy. I can't just sit here and figure it out and tell everybody what it is. So that's why I'm glad that we have this Hose Monster kit. So that way every single hydrant we can just plug in and it spits out for us what it is. And when we were going through these, and this is an older Excel sheet, as you can see, you know, if we have a red hydrant or, you know, we did have a couple that were out of service, we identified it over here in the comment section as to what the issue was. So this way, when we turn it over to Public Works, they would look at it and say, okay, this one's out of service. Was it reported? Yes. And has it been fixed? Yes. And on my master sheet, this is already out of red, and these flows are already put into place, that it's been tested. So we would go back to our Flow MSP app. And like I said, when I first started doing this with the crews, we just identified where the hydrants were. So everything was yellow, just like, some of these hydrants down here. So if you look at our map, every single hydrant was yellow, and we literally had to go back and, type in the address where it was and what the flow rate was. So then obviously that's going to change the color on the map. So this was, not only good to help, identify what our gallons per minute is, but when we start doing our pre-plans and it shows what our required flow is, it's going to tell us what are the best hydrants, for us to utilize in an emergency. Like you can see here, it pops up and identifies these four hydrants, sorry, that are the most advantageous for us within so many feet, and those parameters can be changed to what we can use for that, structure fire. And then obviously we have, the pictures that go along with our pre-plans. So as we, did our sheet, and like I said, we've got 539 hydrants. We actually identified more hydrants as we went along, based on, new hydrants being put in or ones that were fixed and put back in service. And then obviously we're going to have hydrants that we don't test that are, yard hydrants or on private property. And, we've got some that are at, the college, but, at least we know where they are. We did mark those just so we had a reference. We just didn't flow test those. So when we did our Excel sheet, we actually went down through the numbers and by manufacturer. So that way we knew what they were. And then also by the discharge size, 5 inch, 4.5, 2.5. And then there was a couple that for some reason the crews might not have, checked it or didn't write it down. And then also we went by age. So we actually did have a couple that were 1941 hydrants from the year 1941. So this really helped out with Public Works. So that way they had an idea, that we had this detailed of a list, and they could start planning and budgeting for replacement of certain hydrants. And then obviously, these hydrants, I want to say pre-1961, are all 2.5s. So they have the double 2.5 discharges. So by us taking on the hydrant program and developing it how we wanted it, it helped build a relationship with our Public Works, with a lot of our new employees. And we were able to, build our knowledge base of not only knowing, what parts of town might have smaller mains and we're not going to get enough water or less amount of water here as opposed to there, but it also gets our crews out there multiple times a year seeing their first due areas. Because basically we went out first in the spring, located the hydrants and identified them. We went back and flow tested the hydrants, and then we went back a third time and painted the hydrants. So now that we've built this program, we don't have to go back every single year and paint the hydrants. One of the things that we did do is we broke the town into hydrant districts based on the GPS location of hydrants. And you could see basically that each shift has various districts. And then this way, if we know when certain hydrants are bad, we can notify the water department, public works, and work on getting those things taken care of, pretty quickly. We took on a strong public relations campaign utilizing Facebook. We notified people because we just had the merger with County Rescue and the town fire department. We wanted to make sure that everybody knew what was going on in the community. So we took images like this that we found and explained, this is what a fire hydrant looks like, and this is what you don't see underground, and this is the inner workings of it. And we want to educate our community and to show them why we're out there painting hydrants and striping hydrants, and what it's going to do not only for us in the event of an emergency, but also for their insurance rates, and why it's so important to have a lower score on the ISO review. So when we took to Facebook and going out in pre-plans and explaining to everybody, what was going on with this, we had a lot of people because, let's face it, before they didn't have 8-9 people on a shift on the fire department. Before, it was a volunteer organization with a few paid people each day, and the fire trucks didn't go on everything, and they weren't being driven all the time. But now you're seeing 2 ambulances, a chief car, a pickup truck, an engine. Occasionally the ladder would go out, and everybody was questioning, well, what's going on? So by us taking to Facebook and showing, hey, this is this new app that we have, it's called Flow MSP. This is what we're doing, and this is why. It really educated our community and really built, a strong relationship, or made a strong relationship even stronger. And everybody has been behind us 100% with all the improvements that we've been doing with the merger between the rescue department and the fire department. And one of the things we did with our marketing campaign is we came up with a slogan, and it's called Changing the Outcome Together. And we took 2 organizations, brought it together, and we're making it better for our community. And by having, different apps, Active 911, I Am Responding, those things are good for our dispatch purposes. And then now, by utilizing Flow MSP, that's just allowed us to have that much more ability to identify our hydrants and our pre-plans, and to be able to provide the best service to our community, as well as having those resources at our fingertips. And building this fire hydrant program, it's not easy, but on the flip side of that too, it's not really that difficult. And especially for us, we had to build our program from scratch. If our viewers out there today already have these systems in place, it's really a seamless transition, taking what you have, at least from my experience, taking from what you have and implementing it into the Flow MSP platform. It's just going to give you the resources that are going to help you as a fire officer, as a command officer, to do the job better for your people as well as your community. And I know we're getting close to being done here, Michael, but if anybody has any questions, they want to reach out to me, by all means. I think we covered everything, but I don't know if you can think of anything else that we need to cover.
No, I think you addressed a lot of things there that I think are going to be useful for the audience today, Assistant Chief. Um, I want to thank you for taking the time to pull this information together and present it in a really thoughtful way. If there are any questions specific to what Assistant Chief has talked about today, or how Flow MSP will support the process of your hydrant management, you can reach out to us at www.flowmsp.com. If you click the Contact Us button, you'll be asked to fill out a simple contact sheet, and one of us will get back in touch with you very quickly. You can also reach us at sales@flowmsp.com. Even for basic questions, we'll be happy to answer those. If there are any comments from today's webinar, we'll be happy to respond. Questions and comments, we'll be happy to respond to those as well. But Assistant Chief, again, I really appreciate your time and your efforts in pulling this together for us. Be safe, and thanks everybody for joining the webinar today.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you.